All right, welcome everyone. Happy Friday. Today is the day we review the weekly newsletter that comes out today, the Modern Family Dynasty Newsletter. Today we're going to talk about how to cut taxes by 50% and why it's the best time to become a millionaire. And we're going to go through some tips on how to become millionaires, strategies that I learned from working with high net worth clients for the last 20 years. So let's go ahead and get started. My name is Denver Noes, and we're going to start with jumping into how to cut taxes by 50%. And that obviously gets a lot of people's attentions, but I can't stress enough that if you're in the top 10%, meaning you're probably in that income range where you're making $150,000 a year to $1 million per year, you're not going to get wealthy without having tax protection. We talked a lot about this on the event that we had yesterday here on LinkedIn Live. It was great, 725 attendees. So a lot of good information out there. I'm going to give you some really quick tips on how you can actually cut taxes by 50% using some strategies most people aren't aware of. And now when you hear strategies like this, and these are covered in the newsletter this week, you're like, how is it that I'm never hearing about strategies like this? Well, we're talking about incomes, and even once you're getting into 200, like we're using here, $900,000 incomes, $450,000 incomes, $1 million incomes. You're talking about strategies that only really apply to probably less than 5% of the population, maybe even really 2 or 3%. So if you're in that group and this stuff applies to you, obviously that's great, congratulations, but that's why you're not going to hear about this in mainstream advice, because mainstream advice is generated towards more than 95% of Americans that don't really have a tax issue. They have more of a cash flow problem. And so that's why this information is going to be very different. So the case studies here I'm kind of showing on the screen, $225,000 in tax savings, couple in California, both of them working in tech. And, when you live in the Bay Area, and you look at those incomes, they're kind of like, hey, we've accepted that 50% of our money is going to go away to taxes. There's another example of income of $450,000, also, tech employees, $550,000 in tax savings from a business sale. That's money saved, so. And then an e-commerce business, $3 million estimated tax savings. There's about $800,000. So a lot of times these people are going to their CPAs and they're like, hey, I'm out of options. My CPA just tells me you've had a great year and you just got to pay your taxes. And that's kind of the way the world works. But there are other strategies. One of the strategies that is probably the best strategy that I have found is what I call multi-generation endowments. So this strategy was introduced to me by a client of mine, and he had been using it for a number of years. Super smart, does tons of due diligence on the strategies, very high net worth individual. And he had done a lot of homework, and now he's been using this strategy for a number of years, reducing his taxes, by 50%. So in his case, saving $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 a year in taxes. And so it's called multi-generational endowments. We had literally dozens of meetings with the law firms, and I have kind of this high net worth group of clients that, I call the brain trust. We get together. They had their independent counsel review it, their CPAs. Everybody got together and went through this whole process, and everybody's going, wow, this is pretty incredible as far as being compliant, safe, conservative, simple. We even had former IRS attorneys look at this. So you can reduce taxable income by up to 50%. One of the things I love the most about this is that your money never leaves your possession. So if you think about, or if you've looked at a lot of advanced tax strategies out there, going offshore, nothing wrong with that. There can be good strategies. You have things like conservation easement, captive insurance companies. All these things get pretty crazy. And a lot of those strategies do raise big red flags, and the money has to be sent away somewhere. The money's leaving your possession. So one of the things I love about this strategy is the money literally never leaves your possession. You're able to retain your capital, continue to use it for any reason. It's probably the most flexible strategy I've ever seen out there. Has significant advantages over charitable remainder trusts, family limited partnerships, even 1031 exchanges. And it works extremely well for when you have big income spikes. Maybe you do have a high consistent W-2 income, great, it's going to work for that. But maybe you have a big year where you have an exit or a sale, and your income jumps up for those 1 years. And instead of, again, just letting that money go to the IRS, it can work extremely well in reducing those taxes, letting you retain control of that capital. And what it's doing long term is it's creating a long-term charitable obligation. So there is a charitable focus, but the difference between this and other strategies, number one, you're able to get the charitable donation, or you're able to get the tax deduction now. And there's special proprietary agreements this law firm structures where that charity now may be getting paid 40 years, 60 years, 80 years down the road, even down to your second generation. So what it does then is allows you to get the tax reduction now and continue to use your capital and grow it for the entire life. And then very simply, you can have a life insurance policy that pays off the charity at the end, but it can literally add millions and millions of dollars to your bottom line when you start looking at what this tax savings can do. And I'll give you kind of an example. Let's walk through a quick case study. Let's say you're in California, $500,000 household income. You go to talent.com. They have a tax calculator there that will kind of show you what those taxes are going to be. And every tax calculator you put in is going to give you a different number. That's our wonderful tax code. So let's call it, according to this calculator, $215,000 in taxes. So if you employ a strategy like this, I would say by the time you pay the law firm and everything else, I'm going to walk you through these 9 steps here. $215,000 taxes, maybe you could save a net $100,000 in taxes. So the way we loop this together is then you take 50 grand, that just goes to lifestyle to make life easier, which is great because we all want to enjoy more life along the way. Then you take the $50,000, that goes into the 3-to-1 tax-free matching program. You may have seen that program if you've seen a lot of my material. That's the best strategy out there for creating tax-free income streams. So it creates over 5 years, we have $250,000 going into that plan. Again, with money that would have been sent to the IRS, that gets matched with more tax-free money, in that case, roughly about $750,000. So you have $250,000 goes in, $50,000 a year for 5 years, $750,000 tax-free matching. Now we've created this large $1 million tax-free asset, all from tax savings that would have gone to the IRS. That creates an $87,000 a year tax-free income that we're on step 8 now on my little list here, 65 to 90. So $87,000 per year tax-free, age 65 to 90, getting over $3 million in distribution, all tax-free, all generating back from tax savings. So that's the power of what next level planning really is. I know people are looking at this going, what the heck is this? But that's what next level planning really is. And when you think about, and I've shown this chart before in some of the events and the presentations, when you look at the difference here, what you see in this big bar on the right-hand side is the top 1%. It's about $11 million in net worth to get into that top 1%. The next bars to the left are the top 10%. It's about 1.2 million. So you see a big gap between the top 10% and the top 1%. The difference, by and large, a big part of it is taxes. And on that previous example I just showed, you're able to create $3 million in extra wealth using tax savings and tax strategy strategy, money that would have gone to the IRS, and using financial leverage in a smart way. So I can't overstate enough the impact of what taxes can do for you. And that's why an example I always use is when you look at $250,000 in tax payments equals $1 million in wealth lost minimum. People always go, how do you get that number? Well, let's just say if you kept that money, we just talked about a saving strategy. Instead of sending $50,000 a year to the IRS for 5 years, you kept it. Could you double that 250 grand 2 times over the course of your life? Right? So maybe you're investing, maybe you're going to buy a business, maybe you're just letting it grow, whatever you're doing. What's it going to take? 10 to 12 years for it to double once? So 250 grand goes to 500 grand, and then another 10 years, 500 grand goes to $1 million. So over the course of your life, you could probably do better than that, but minimally you could double that money twice. And so you can start to see that if this is happening every year, that's how the taxes start to compound and the amount of wealth that you're losing gets bigger and bigger. Okay, so that's the tax piece. And then the next section of the newsletter, we're going to jump into, and by the way, if you want to get more information on some of those tax strategies, you can join the Wealth for Life group. I'll put some resources in the video descriptions, and I'll show you some more resources here as we get into the recap. So every newsletter, we do 4 sections: a learning section, a chart, productivity, and a concept. And so now we're jumping to the chart section. The number of millionaires has skyrocketed. So that's good news, right? There's a lot of doom and gloom out there in the world, but there is also a lot of reasons to be optimistic. It has never been a better time to become a millionaire in this country. And if you look at the numbers here, what it's showing here is that since 2000 to 2022, the number of millionaires in the United States has gone up, nearly 3-fold. So a big increase in the number of millionaires. And then, so in this week's newsletter, I shared a number of tips on how you can do that. and how you can, get into that millionaire status and accelerate what you're doing. So the first one I'm going to talk about is what's called the Rob strategy. And that's how you can use your 401k, or if you're leaving a job, or your retirement accounts to start a business. Because if you look at the top 1%, what's their number one asset class? It's typically going to be businesses. Businesses is going to be number one. Real estate's probably number two. Usually their smallest asset allocation is typically going to be stocks, even though that's what's promoted to 99% of Americans. And again, I'm not anti-stock. I'm an investment advisor. I'm a fiduciary. I sell stocks. We set those plans up for people, but it's a very smaller portion of what you should be doing if you're really trying to get wealth to the next level. So this is called the Rob's strategy. That's where you use a retirement account for business startup. And it's a very simple process. You can take your 401k, a new C Corp is established. That's step one that you see on here. Then that C Corp establishes a retirement plan like a 401k. And then you roll your existing funds into that. Doesn't create a taxable event. And then that 401k now purchases stock in this new C Corp. And now the C Corp has cash to start a business, buy a business, do a franchise, things like that. So it's good if you want to start building extra income streams. And of course, do owning businesses have risk? Yes, of course they do. Does the stock market has risk? Yes, of course it does. So there's a lot of people that say, I would like to more bet on myself necessarily than, having something that's outside of control. And that's one thing that I hear a lot of times about the market is that, people, it's completely outside the control of what's going to happen. So, you can work your whole life saving money into this 401k, but everything that happens is subject to things that you have no control over whatsoever. So people like this idea of getting more control, looking at businesses, and using, this is a great way to start it. Now you still might be adding funding to it. You can still use that with SBA loans, and you can still use it with outside capital, however you're raising capital, but it can be a good portion and a good start to it right there if you don't have outside capital sitting around. I really like this strategy. And I know right now that there are a lot of people looking to buy businesses. I mean, ever since you see on Twitter, there's all kinds of influencers promoting, buying businesses. Got to tell you, there's a lot of capital right now looking to buy businesses. And I have a lot of clients in that process of looking to buy businesses. And it's not easy because you hear the stats about, there's so many baby boomers retiring. They have businesses they want to sell, but it's not easy to find those businesses. So another thing I talked about in the newsletter as an alternative is franchise businesses. And I really like franchise businesses a lot. I know that when people first start looking at them, they start thinking, you hear about the fees and the cost to set them up. But if you haven't looked at franchises before, there are so many different types of like non-food type franchises. And those are probably my favorite. These kind of niche sectors where you have all these little businesses. But the benefits there are they're kind of a business in a box, right? So if you haven't started businesses before, or if you're not too familiar with starting businesses, they make it really easy. And I'll give you kind of my 6 reasons I like them right there. Number one is speed to market. So if you want to start a franchise business, you go through the disclosures and then you're basically, boom, you're going in there and you're getting your training and you're jumping on and do it. You're not sitting around for the next year trying to find a business to buy. So you can get right into it, start the businesses that you want. Again, the categories right now are so just amazing to me. Everything from these kind of niche business to business. Like there's one I like where it's a garbage crushing business where they have these big garbage crushers and they go out into businesses and they smash down the dumpsters so the businesses don't have to dump their trash as much. And it's a cash cow. Those businesses are cash cows. You have some of these sports franchises for kids and things. Like I have an 8-year-old and a 12-year-old, and we're looking at different franchises in the kids sports arena. Because if you have kids, you know how much parents spend on sports. And we see in the areas that we're in Arizona, just incredible demand for that. You can buy some of these businesses for $50,000 to $80,000 on franchise size, and they can generate $150,000, $200,000, $250,000 in profit. So they can be very lean, very profitable. Kids swimming is another one I've seen recently that is just fascinating to me. Very low overhead, can build up good returns. And so there's a lot of those different types, and you're able to kind of mitigate a lot of the risk and not have as much experience, because when you buy these franchises, of course, you're getting all the advantages they have: supply chain efficiency, strength in numbers, and you can go do the trainings. They're going to get you up to speed. It's that whole business in a box concept. So if you want resources on those, just DM me on LinkedIn. There's some great franchise consultants I know that have some incredible businesses, and And a lot of times the great thing about that is higher exit multiples. So you can buy multiple territories, multiple locations, bundle them up to become easier to sell. I've had a lot of clients that have done extremely well, multiples of selling those franchises and building them up. So that's certainly something I would look at on the franchise side. Again, we're talking about in this section of the newsletter, tips to become wealthier, become millionaires. Never been a better time to do that. The next strategy I would look at, and I do want to mention that if you want a little more information of deeper dives in some of those topics, you can also listen to the podcast on Apple Podcasts. Just search Wealth for Life Denver Noest. You'll be able to find that podcast. I have some interviews there on the franchise side, and you can get a little more description of that as well. So as we're moving along, again, some of the tips that I mentioned for becoming a millionaire is understanding this concept of financial leverage. I mentioned this in the newsletter. And if you understand the ability of leverage, earning money on the spread, this is how banks make fortunes. Banks, literally, the banking industry is built on a concept called arbitrage, earning money on the spread, however you want to say it. And what this calculator simply shows is, you'll see right there, if you take $1 million loan and you go out and you borrow at 6%, and that earns 7%. So you're literally only making a 1% spread on that money. Over the next 15 years, you have the cost that comes out, the loan interest, you have the interest earned because it's compounding, generates an $859,032 profit. You'll see there on the slide, an $859,000 profit by deploying $1 million in capital where you're paying 6% and earning 7%. A simple 1% spread makes you an extra $859,000. So now people are familiar about doing this on real estate. There's other assets, of course, you can do this on, like the tax-free matching strategy we talk about, where you don't have to even make interest payments for 15 years. The bank literally gives you the capital to use for 15 years. And you can earn this spread without loan docs, without credit checks, without personal collateral. That is certainly one of the best strategies out there. I'll talk about that, and I'll give you some resources for that as well. But if you learn this concept of earning money on the spread and how it can literally make fortunes, that will open your eyes a lot of how the wealthy get wealthier. How do you take wealth to the next level? And it's an alternative to what the average investor is taught to do. The average investor is like, hey, you want to get wealthier, you're going to take more risk with your own capital. And what happens is then the average investor gets upset when they lose. But what the wealthy do is they take larger amounts of other people's money, they put them in safe assets, and they win every time. That's a simple part of the formula for getting more into that millionaire framework. Okay, so I do have a video on that. If you want to understand kind of the math of that, there's a video on YouTube that I have, and you can search it right there. It's called How Financial Leverage Multiplies Returns on my YouTube channel. If you just want to understand the math of how earning on a spread can make you fortunes and make you wealthy. And you don't have to do it, like, again, I can't stress that enough. It doesn't always have to be real estate. There's ways you can use other capital without personal guarantees, without having to even make interest payments to be on the hook for the loan. There's a lot of innovative things out there today. All right, and if you do have questions as I'm chatting, you can put them into the chat. I just finally opened my Restream chat box, and so I see some of the comments coming in. Thank you, Joseph, for the comments. I agree with you. Banks create money out of thin air. So now, as we're going into again, keeping more of your own money. How do we become a millionaire? These are some of the 4 tips I listed in the newsletter. And part of the cat is keeping your own money is using tax bracket strategy. So tax brackets are the ability to take, taxable, have 2 types of income, taxable and tax-free, using those in combination to drop into lower tax brackets, going from 37% to 22%. That is going to allow you to save 6 figures or more in taxes, literally a fortune in taxes by dropping to lower tax brackets. It's a simple strategy, but it is one of the most underutilized strategies in financial planning. And if every professional who's a high income earner, saying making income from 150 to 1 million, every one of you should have this type of strategy in your plan. So when you get down to retirement, it will help you save literally hundreds of thousands of even millions of dollars in taxes. And I'm going to break it down for you and how that works. So I do have more deeper dives and videos on this, but here's the essence. So tax brackets are tiered. Right. So on the right hand side of this, you will see every block of money is taxed at a different rate. I'm just using married, filing jointly right here. So what you want to be doing while you're working is you're out there and you are getting tax deductions with your 401k, or even better, using some of the other, strategies we just talked about. But you're getting a deduction of 32%. And then when you go to retire, you can see the first 80,000 up to 80,000 is taxed at 12%. Now you want to be withdrawing your 401k money at that tax rate. Then you got a pretty good savings, right? You deducted it at 32, you're pulling it out at 12. That's how this whole program is designed to work. But the problem is that high income earners don't have enough money in a tax-free position. They don't have any money usually. So then they get down to retirement, you start pulling everything out. Everything out is taxed as ordinary income, not just your contribution, but now all of your gains is taxed at ordinary income as well. So you end up losing any of the advantages, and the taxes end up costing you more money. And if taxes go up, you're even penalized further. So like the example I showed on the left, simple math, if you go out there and you're in a 32% bracket and you have a $100,000 tax-free income stream coming in, that's going to save you $32,000 a year. So $32,000 a year times what, 20 years, 25 years retirement, $800,000 in tax savings. Previous example, can you double that money once or twice by keeping it invested? So that's how 800 turns into 1.6, 1.6 turns into 3.2 million. That's how that's how you're bridging the gap from going from 3 million, 5 million in net worth, 5 million and 10 million, and getting into those top 1% is using these types of efficiencies. So I can't say enough about tax bracket strategy and how important it is to use. That video is also on YouTube. You can check that out, using the tax bracket strategy to save a fortune in taxes. I also have I'll share my screen real quick. There's a 4-page document I have that I'm happy to send out. If you just message me on LinkedIn, that goes into the tax bracket strategy, how you combine that with the tax-free matching program, that 3-to-1 matching, how that can create some tax-free income. It's a simple 4-pager that will kind of give you the that information, but you can just message me on LinkedIn, and we'll go and you can have that document. Check out the videos as well. All right, so now let's kind of move on. So we've covered a lot so far. I know on the recap, this is my productivity tip of the week, and you have and that's an app called Clean Email, right? So it's a very simple app. And the email out there, my email inbox is from Gmail. The other ones, you get these tens of thousands of emails in there. So this is just a simple productivity tip. Check out this app, Clean Email, and it can literally bulk delete hundreds of thousands of emails at a time. And then it creates these automatic filters you can put in for all these promotions and everything else that deletes the stuff. It can help you auto unsubscribe if you got all these extra subscriptions. So again, it's a real simple tool. It's like $30 a year, but it really keeps the email clean. And if your email box is out of control, I recommend going and checking that out and continuing to use it. So just a quick productivity for the week. Now we'll jump on to the concept. I'm going to take a quick look at the chat. These slides, yes. So these slides, Joseph, will be posted in the Wealth for Life group. So after every week, this thing will be posted in the Wealth for Life group. So make sure you check that out. All right, let's get into the last section of the newsletter today, which is the concept section. And I'll talk about a little bit about building a modern family dynasty. So this is really one of the most important concepts that doesn't get enough conversation. When you look at building a modern family dynasty, and this is how I describe it, legacy is not about money. It's about taking the values and beliefs you've used to create success and creating structures and frameworks so your future generations can thrive and rise up to new levels thanks to the foundation that you have set forth. That's what it means to create a modern family dynasty. Because when you look at what happens to wealth over the course of, as it's inherited, 70% of wealth is gone by the first generation, meaning by the time your kids get older, and 90% will be gone by the time the grandkids get it. So when I talk to people a lot about this, and you ask people, why is this? Well, they think my kids don't know how to handle it. I don't trust them. They don't deserve it. You get all these crazy answers. I've talked to someone over the summer that has $10 million in net worth, and his kids have no idea that he has that. And this is a terrible plan, because all that's going to happen is, again, there's going to be infighting, and then the wealth is going to get squandered away. So you're building structures, and private foundations are one of my favorite ways to do that. They also offer incredible tax benefits. It's very easy to create private foundations, and they're a good structure. Not only do they have incredible tax benefits, you can deduct 30% of your taxable income. You create this idea of what you want to do and what your mission is. And what you're trying to do here is to take the values and beliefs and everything that you have, create structures then that help your family learn and continue and prosper. And that's so much more powerful than just giving people lump sums of money. In fact, one of the clients of mine, they have a foundation that their grandmother started. It's a summer camp for kids. She started like 100 years ago. And it's such a source of pride and enjoyment for her entire family to come down there. They all participate in it. It's just something that unites everyone. And what a great cause to work for. So when you start thinking about the Modern Family Dynasty and what you're trying to do there, maybe it's you have passions for teaching entrepreneurship for kids, or maybe your passion is working with animals, or maybe it's, teaching kids sports, whatever the passions are, you can create structures, financial structures, where money can go into. You get massive tax benefits to do it, but then it allows your generations to grow and continue. Like myself right now, I have like I mentioned, my 8, 12-year-olds. We're looking at different businesses that are kid related, so my kids can participate in those and start learning over the course of their life what it means to build businesses. We do the same thing on the charity side. So we're teaching them what it means to contribute and give more into society. And that's so important, I think, when you combine it with a lot of the tax strategy stuff that I like to talk about. Because a lot of times, when I say we're trying to reduce taxes, that doesn't mean we are anti-tax. And it doesn't mean we don't need to pay our fair share. But what we do need to do is get away from the idea that paying our fair share means that we're just going to send money to the government and then we're done with our community obligation. So what happens, I think, when you have this high tax environment where you have people that are probably like you, probably listening, incomes from 150,000 to 1 million, you're in this high tax environment. It does tend to build some animosity because you have someone that's taking 30, 40% of your money all the time. So you get mistrust. It creates this divisiveness in society, this us versus them. When you create these tax protected structures where you're retaining more of your own wealth and your wealth is growing and accelerating, you're building this modern family dynasty, generosity, ingenuity, cooperation, all those things continue to increase. And that allows you to do more good in the world. It's the framework. So the amount of value you can contribute to the work grows exponentially. And you do that as soon as possible. You start training your kids while they're young. And I know a lot of times people are like, well, my kids are already old. They're already screwed up. Well, you know what? But they might not take up the helm, but maybe the grandkids will. And then maybe the grandkids take it to the next generation and the next level. So those are the things you want to do and try. And if you want to brainstorm around ideas and learn how we do this and how we help people structure this, just DM me on LinkedIn, send me a message. And I love chatting about these types of things. So that's kind of the recap for the week. If you haven't joined the group, the Wealth for Life group on LinkedIn, you can go to wealthforlifegroup.com. That URL will take you right to the group on LinkedIn. But that's a great place to get information. We share a lot of strategies that I can't post publicly, in the group, and a lot of different resources. A great place for Q&A and a lot of different strategy information. So my name is Denver Noes. This was the Friday recap for September 15th. I appreciate you listening, and I hope to talk with you soon.